Hello friends, Tanya here for Trinity Stamps, and today is day 9 of the 12 days of Christmas. As part of the 12 days of Christmas, there is a special sale for each day, and today, being day 9, is save 30% on all Simply Sentimental products, and you will use the code 12days9. Check that description box below for a link and for the code. Today I am doing a set of boxed note cards, and it is a great time to try some different techniques when you're doing repetitive card making. I'm starting out here with 3 distress inks, and I'm going to compare Spellbinder's Glimmer specialty cardstock to Hammermill Smooth 80-pound cardstock. I started with the specialty cardstock from Spellbinders. Now this will always give you a completely crisp, gorgeous, glimmered image every time. But it, as you can see, is not the best for ink blending. It is a little difficult to get the blending to look smooth and gradient with the distress inks here. I have worked it pretty hard. It's got a similar texture to Yupo paper. Here's the Hammermill blended with the distress inks compared. Now we're going to use the distress oxides. Again, I'm showing you the specialty cardstock first, and it blends much more smoothly with the distress oxides. There is some fun streaking that I'm combining in our blending here to add a nice sky effect. I really like how this blended on the specialty cardstock. Definitely, if you're going to ink blend on the specialty cardstock, I think I would go with the distress oxide over the distress inks. The color is a little more muted with the oxides, but the blend is so much better. Now, this did not really affect the end result. All of the skies looked beautiful. And here we have the oxide versus the ink. And I've laid out all of the different blending that I'm going to use. Next, I pulled out the Falling Snow foiling plate, and we're going to do some opaque white and some opal foiling, one on each of the different kinds of cardstocks with the different kinds of inks. And then I decided to throw in one set of Aura foil because I just love that foil. Next I pulled out the Winter Tree foil and cut, and we're going to use several different kinds of foil to foil on each of these, and I think they turned out just stunning. Next we're going to use the 4-bar envelope builder die set, and there are 4-bar matte frames or sized rectangles here, and we're going to use the larger of the two that are not 3.5 by 5 inches. That's what size a 4-bar card is 3.5 by 5. So I took some cardstock and I cut it down to 5 by 7, scored at 3.5, and that gives us our 3.5 by 5 inch note card. And each of these pieces are about 3.25 by 4 3/4, and we'll adhere these directly to the card base. I'm not adding extra layers on these at all. I want them to be very lightweight and mailable. Now, the 2 tones of foils on this, along with the ink blending, give it a lot more dimension than if it was just a flat card. And it really brings the design to the forefront. Now, I chose a design that would work for many different occasions. You could do this for a Christmas card, a birthday card. This would make a great masculine or gender neutral kind of card. And I could have left these note cards blank, just like this on the front. But I do add some sentiments to the front here in just a little bit. I am going to leave each of these assembly steps in the video because sometimes it's soothing to just watch someone else craft. Sometimes when I just need to wind down, I turn on a craft video, and it's almost as relaxing to watch someone else do the crafting as it is to do the crafting myself. And I thought I'd give you that little moment of peace in this very busy holiday season. I have 6 cards here that I'm assembling, and this is the last of the six. And I believe this is pewter on white with the specialty paper. Next, we're going to add some sentiments. We're using the Simply Sentimental Thanks here. And I chose this lovely thin scripty thank you. And I'm going to heat emboss this several times. I pulled out my mini Misti and I set it up in with the stamp at the bottom edge. And I have this long strip of white cardstock. It happens to measure 4 1/4 by 11 inches. So it's a half sheet of cardstock cut the long way. And I am just going to move the paper down for each stamping so that the entire word is on the outside of the mini Misti before I stamp the next version. Now, I did get a little carried away here with how many I did in a row, especially since I was double stamping. And so that one of these is a little dry for adding the embossing powder. I don't know if this particular embossing powder is still available. It's called Blizzard, and it's a Brutus Monroe embossing powder. I'm pretty sure I got it when it was when I was part of the Embossing Powder of the Month kit club. I went a little club crazy for a while there, and this is one of the embossing powders. It is gorgeous. I love it. It is a silver and a blue, and you could combine your own embossing powders to create a custom blend if you wanted, or just use whatever you have in your stash. I just thought the blues would be perfect. Now I've got this cut out, or excuse me, embossed 7 times, and I've die cut it from all of those panels, and now we're going to adhere these to the fronts of each of the cards. You could, like I said, leave this blank without a sentiment, or you could add a variety of sentiments. I chose to keep this simple because you didn't want to see me stamp and die cut several different sentiments, and stuck with thank you. Since this is the holiday season right now, I know that we'll probably need some thank you cards in the very near future. I don't know if everyone most people probably don't send thank you cards. However, I find that they are very handy to have around, and the winter season is definitely upon us. I will get lots of use out of these cards, even if I just give them away as a gift. I love the peaceful feeling of the snow falling in the gentle sky and that beautiful tree that's reflecting maybe even some moon glow. It's very much a beautiful scene that I would see from my front window or even driving down the road. I think this would be a great gift for a teacher or for a neighbor or acquaintance, someone that you want to give a little something to, but not anything that you spent a lot of money on. We're almost through all of the cards here, and as you can see, I have a heavyweight block on top of the sentiment so that it gets nicely adhered. And you know how I usually layer these up with a couple extra layers of cardstock before I adhere them on the page or on the card? This time I did not do that, all in the name of keeping this nice and flat. But since there is a good contrast between the background and the sentiment with that white cardstock embossed with the blue embossing powder, it stands out beautifully without the need for extra dimension. Here are all 6 of the cards, and since we had already used the 4-bar envelope builder to create one of the panels, I thought, why not use it to make some envelopes? I took out some paper from my stash, and I probably had this paper for 20 years. It's just some 12 by 12 lightweight pattern paper that is only patterned on one side. Now, when you're creasing this, you need to be a little careful because there's an embossed line on this large body of the envelope die also, and you want to crease on the most distal line from each from the center. So distal means the closest to the end, and you want to make sure that you're not going to make your envelope too small, although that even if you did fold it on the other line, it just would make it a little more difficult to fold your flaps down. I've just used some liquid glue to adhere those seams and some double-sided tape to do the seal on the last flap. Next, I decide to measure the stack of cards to see how high I need to make the depth of my box. Now, my measurements turned out to be 4 inches by 5.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So I did some math, and this is a 7 by 8.5 inch piece of cardstock, and I did 2 of them. We're making a hinged box, and I'm going to score at 1.5 inches all the way around both of these pieces of cardstock. This will create the bottom and the top, and since I want this to be extra sturdy and I don't want the lid to be hard to hang on to, I wanted to make this a hinged box. Very simple construction, very simple math. The way I decided my measurements was by measuring the size that I needed and going just a little bigger, and then adding the depth of the box to each side. So when I wanted 1 dimension, I doubled the depth that I needed. In this case, it was 1.5 inches deep that I wanted this box to be. So I added 3 inches to whichever dimension I was measuring. So it was 4 by 5.5 inches that I wanted it to be. So 4 plus 3 equals 7. And the other side was 5.5 inches. So it was 5.5 inches plus 3 inches, and that's how I got my dimensions. Next, I am cutting my little flaps free. And yes, I goofed, but it still will work on the construction of our box. You just need to fold one of these flaps in so that it will adhere to the side panel. Or each of these you need to. And it really, in the end, did not matter that I cut one of those on the wrong spot. We'll just use some adhesive to stick the flap to the side panel. And you may have noticed that I took a little extra notch of paper out when I made these flaps. And that's to allow for some extra room when you fold these flaps over and adhere them so that they don't stick above the side panel. Just going to adhere them. And again, I really prefer liquid glue. It doesn't add any extra dimension to the cardstock, and it really has the strongest hold. I used to use double-sided tape in the sticky strip, like the Sukwang tape or the score tape, however you're familiar with that. While it has a very good hold, especially initially, over time it does start to let loose. And liquid glue just creates a permanent bond, especially our good quality glues. Now this is the lid of the box, and you can see that one side I had cut the flaps off completely, and we'll adhere that to the side panel of the bottom of the box. And I'm sorry I got a little off screen here. I'm just lining that flap up with the side panel. Then I lay the card box on its side and use my finger to apply some good firm pressure. Next, I pulled out a circle punch from my stash, and I'm going to mark the center of this panel. Since it's 5.5 inches, that would be 2 3/4. I'm just taking a pencil and I'm going to add a little tick mark there, and then I'll use my circle punch and line that up the center of the top of that circle punch with that little tick mark. There's some marks on the side of that punch on each side of the hole telling you where the halfway mark is, and I lined that up with the bottom edge of that flap. And that is the completed box construction. Super easy. You can make a box any size you want, just using some simple math. Next, I took a panel of the ink blended and foiled image, and this was a 3.5 by 5-inch panel. And since this box is bigger than the cards, I took a 3 3/4 by 5 1/4 inch white panel to mat that image. And that's the entire box and card set. I think this turned out gorgeous. I did decide to add that last thank you embossed and die cut sentiment and add that to the front of the box also. You could use this as a thank you gift, or you could just use this as a way to say clearly what's inside the box. If you've ever bought a boxed set of cards, it often has the design on the front of the box. One last peek at this box, which I'm actually quite thrilled with. I didn't have to redo this at all. It worked the first time, and sometimes when you're making 3D products, that is not always the case. All right, here's a quick recap of the projects that I made today. Be sure to give me a comment, subscribe, like this video, and check that description box below for all of the products that I used today. Until next time, here are a couple more videos I thought you might enjoy. Remember to check the description box below for the code and the link to the sale for today. Bye-bye.